Today's daf is daf Chaf Aleph. To reiterate what we did in the Mishnah, I think I learned yesterday a little bit wrong in Rabbi Yossi, so let's quickly repeat what we said. So we have an Avera we learned before. You're not permitted to give a resting place to a goy in Eretz Yisrael. Lo yisechanim. It's an Isser in the Torah. And then the question is, do we therefore decree also that we proscribe renting to a goy, because next time you might sell to a goy? And then we have fields. When you have fields, there's two things when you sell to a goy in Israel. First, you're giving them a resting place like Israel, but in addition, you're taking away the chiyuvim of meiser, the obligations of giving meiser. Chiyuv meiser on the land, and by giving it to a goy, you take that away. So we have two opinions in Mishnah, Rameh and Rabbi Yossi. And there are three different regions. One region is Eretz Yisrael, one region is Surah, and Surah, which is adjacent to Eretz Yisrael, and one region is the rest of the Diaspora, the rest of Chutz La'aretz. So the Isser Leisachanim obviously only applies in Eretz Yisrael. But how far do we take these proscriptions? How far do we take these gezeres? So according to Rameir, in Eretz Yisrael, not only you can't sell, obviously, because that's an Isser in the Torah, nor can you rent a house to a guy, and you're not allowed to rent fields either. In Eretz Yisrael, everything is forbidden. In Surah, we're permitted to rent houses. You're not allowed to sell to them, because if you're going to sell to them in Surah, maybe you'll sell it to Israel, or we'll see, maybe Surah is forbidden on its own right, according to our mayor. But renting you're permitted, because you're a step away, so we permit you to rent. But when it comes to fields, because of the double Isser by fields, we still do not rent fields in Surah as well. And in Chutz La'aretz, you can even sell them houses, because there's no problem there. And we're not going to make such a leap. You sell them a house here, you'll sell them at Yisrael. But in Surah, you cannot. Sorry, in Chutz La'aretz, you cannot sell fields. You can rent fields, but selling fields you can't, because the double Isser we're a step more machmer. That's the view of Rabbi. Rabbi Yossi, however, says that in Eretz Yisrael you can rent houses. I don't believe in this whole gezerah when it comes to houses. So you can rent houses. Only when it comes to fields, you cannot rent fields in Eretz Yisrael because of that double Isser, and therefore we're worried next time you sell. But in Surah, you can sell houses as well. We're not worried. And you're permitted to rent out fields. We don't want you to sell fields because we'll make a gezerah. But in Chutz you can do whatever you want. And then the mission concluded that even in those places we're allowed to rent, but not for living quarters, because they're going to bring Avodah Zarah in, but rather for other things, for warehousing and storing things. Okay, so we're up to the Gemara trying to understand my ain't tzarich loy mesadas. Not only not allowed to rent houses, surely you're not allowed to rent fields. Why are fields any worse? Because there are two averas involved. You give them a resting place in the land. Number one. Number two, to come mafki. You're removing the ability to give ma'aser. Houses also you're taking away two mitzvahs. What is that? First of all, chanoyas kaka. You're giving them a resting place, yes. If you didn't sell to a guy, you have an obligation of putting a mezuzah on the house. So now you sell the house to a guy, you no longer have the mitzvah mezuzah. So why are we more strict and stringent with fields over houses? Answer the Gemara. Mezuzah chayvus hadari. There's no mitzvah to place. There's no mitzvah on the house to have a mezuzah, because it's only if you live there, then you have to have a mezuzah. Even if a yid would own the house, if he's not living there, he doesn't have to put on a mezuzah. Masha'enke, when it comes to fields, the field itself the land itself has a chiyuv of giving meiser. That's only again if you live there. So only somebody lives there, no mitzvah. Yeah, exactly. Now, there is a machlekes in the Kedusha in other places. If when a guy owns land in Eretz Yisrael, is there still a chiyuv ma'aser? Just he won't do it, or there's no chiyuv ma'aser at all, because yesh kinyan lenachil have chiyuv ma'aser. The goyim have a kinyan to take away the mitzvah of ma'aser. So someone will learn this Gemara will only work out if you hold that the goyim take away the mitzvah of ma'aser. Others hold, even according to the view, the goyim don't take it away, but the fact is they won't give ma'aser. Taisha does not like the second view, because the word lahafkiya sounds like they've uprooted, they've removed the mitzvah completely. Not that the mitzvah is still there, just not heeding to it. Okay, let's continue with the Gemara. Yeah. Yeah, so Gemara further. And by the way, Tesis here says, which is a big machlek that holds that a guy who rents a house, you could rent it to a yid. So Tesis says, Mahatorah, if you rent a house, you're not chayiv in mezuzah. Right, you have 30 days if you're renting a house before you have to put on mezuzah. If you're renting a house, you're not chayiv in mezuzah because it says beis checha, has to be your house. This isn't your house. The mask is not chayiv, not living there, and the soich is not chayiv because it's not his house, it's not beis checha. And therefore, when even if you could have rented to a yid, there's still no chiv. You're not taking away a chiv mezuzah because there is no chiv mezuzah on the house under any circumstance. Okay, let's continue. The two dots, about 15 lines on top. Besudia maskine botim. So Sudi, you're allowed to rent houses, but not allowed to rent fields. Why can't you sell houses? Because we're worried about Mishum. Because next time you sell it to Yisrael. No, since you're not allowed to rent it to Yisrael as well, you shouldn't be able to rent the Suda. Why aren't we worried about Schidus? Answer the Gemara, he goofer gezeda. Why can't you rent a house in Eretz Yisrael? Because there's any inherent issue. It's only we're worried next time you'll sell a house in Eretz Yisrael. So that's already gezeda d'Rabbanan. You want me not to be able to rent a house in Surah because he might rent a house in Eretz Yisrael. That's called a double gezeda, and we don't make a gezeda on top of a gezeda unless we have sometimes the expression kula chod gezeda. It's all one gezeda, but this isn't. It's another layer. He goofer gezeda. The whole idea is a gezeda. We don't do that. I know, but you banned renting a field, and why can't you rent a field of Suda? Because next time you rent a field at Yisrael, and why can't you rent a field at Yisrael, rent out to a guy? Because next time you sell it, so we are making a double gzeda. But Schidus, the Suda, we're renting a field in Suda, the gzeda, because gazin, and we ban it. So you might know there's different. Hasam lav gzeda who Rameir holds it's not a gzeda because he holds kasava kibush yochid shmei kibush. He holds that surah is actually forbidden. Is part of Yisrael. Now, what exactly is kibush yochid? So I told you what Rashi said yesterday, and some Rishonim here, traces, and other places as well. That kibush yochid means that David HaMelech, for example, took it upon himself. It wasn't instructed by the Urim Tumim. Didn't have 600,000 people. It doesn't mean literally 600,000 people because most of Yisrael was conquered individually by each shevet. They each conquered their own territories. It doesn't mean that means that it was by all the Eden agreed to it. However, there are some Rishonim who learn in Gittin and other places, and here as well, that kibush yochid means you didn't conquer yet the entire Eretz Yisrael, and you're conquering new land. David HaMelech, when he conquered this land, they still haven't conquered yet the entire Eretz Yisrael. Really, Yerushalayim. They didn't buy it. So since they didn't conquer yet the entire Eretz Yisrael, it's called kibush yochid. Only once you conquer the entire Eretz Yisrael, we don't need Urim Tumim, we don't need what we do need is make sure that first you carry out with Eibush one. There's an expression that you haven't yet conquered, you're already conquering more. Okay, so therefore, let's ask a simple question. So if you're telling me that it's Eretz Yisrael, then why could you rent houses in Suda? So the Gemara is Suda these Beit Tartin, but Suda, even though it's also it's kibush yochi, but it's a step lower. The Rabban at least decided to make some kind of a distinguishing difference between Suda and Eretz Yisrael. So Suda these Beit Tartin are two issues. Goes to Beit Rabban, the Rabban goes in Suda as well. Or the Botim the Lesbu Tarti, Botim only have one issue. Goes to Beit Rabban. So there's no Gzeda here. It's Suda itself. Okay, and then Rameir said that even in Chutzlaret we still carry some Yisurim, and that is that your houses, no problem, do whatever you want because we're too far away. But when it comes to fields, you can only rent; you can't sell fields. Again, the same thing. So there's two issues with Rabban Gezer. You're allowed to even sell. Rabbi Yossi, however, says different. Rabbi Yossi says in Eretz Yisrael you're allowed to rent houses because he's not worried about the Gzeda at all. But only fields he's worried. And in Suda is a step lower, so therefore you can even sell houses, but you cannot sell fields. And in Chutzlaret is everything permitted. So Rabbi Yossi says, Maskin let botim. My time again. So my fields no. Sada it's the same theme all the way through. Sada they have two isurim gozer b'hurabana. Botim the les b'tati like gozer b'hurabana. Uvesuda moichi in Suda you're allowed to sell the houses. You're allowed to sell houses, but again you're not allowed to sell fields. My time, somebody holds kibush yochid loish me kibush. He holds a kibush yochid loish me kibush, and therefore it's not part of Israel. And therefore holds you're allowed to sell the houses. We don't make the gzeda. So how come fields you can't sell? All of a sudden, but that goes with a again. A field that has two issues, you're taking also away the chiyuv and ma'aser. Therefore, abundant book. But in level, it's goes with abundant. When it comes to Chutzlaret, it's meichin. When it comes to Chutz La'aretz, you can sell completely. My time, because Kivin the American goes in this far to make that leap that if we allow something it's so clear to everybody, but the difference of Chutz and Israel, because you're permitted to do things in Chutz does not automatically mean that you might make a mistake in her and think, oh, you can do the same thing in Israel. You're not allowed to endanger people's lives. You're not allowed, if you sell to Goyim, you're not allowed to make a shchuna. You're not allowed to make, you get three people together because you're going to harm people. The Rebbe in Tafshin Chav Tes wrote the two famous letters because in Crown Heights, like in many neighborhoods in New York, as soon as a guy moved into the neighborhood, everybody got caught up in this frenzy, and they sold at any price, at any cost. And I remember my landlord, I lived in Carroll Street, and we were the first. My landlord was the first one to sell to a guy, and within a year, like 5, 6 more houses were sold, and then everybody ran away. So the Rebbe put out a letter that Borough Park was having the same problem. Everybody's having the same problem. So the Rebbe wrote, and they're all moving to Rockaway and then moving to Long Island. So the Rebbe wrote two letters. And basically what the Rebbe was talking about is that not only are you harming the neighborhoods, physically, because they're going to get hurt, but you're ganef, because the price of real estate went straight down. And the Rebbe wrote all these makoides, but you're a mazik, ganef, every possible lashon. And it took a few years, but it arrested that whole thing. But by the time it took effect, a lot of the damage was done already. So he was already. You're not allowed to build. You're not allowed to sell a shchuna. You're not allowed to sell and create a non-Jewish neighborhood in a Jewish area. Well, kamba shchuna, what's considered a shchuna, a neighborhood? 3 houses is considered a neighborhood. So if that's the worry, how can you even sell to one non-Jew? Maybe you'll sell to one non-Jew, and then he's going to strata title his house and break it up and sell it to the three non-Jews. He'll sell it to 2 others. So one, you shouldn't be selling at all because you have no control once you give it over to the non-Jew. You know what they'll do with the property? They'll put on 3 units. Amar Abaye says Abaye alifnei mafkedinan alifnei the lifnei lo mafkedinan. It's not that there's nothing to do with the here, but the idea that you only have to worry about what you're doing to go the next step and say, but what's that person going to do? That's not your cheshbon. You're not a navi, and you can't be expected to anticipate a chess game of all the pieces that are going afterwards. As long as you didn't do anything wrong. And since we said that to sell one person all right, you don't have to take into account that this one person might then break down the house or whatever and sell it to 3 people. 3 people. Yeah. So the Gemara, it says in the Mishnah, and even those places that we say you're permitted to rent out, they don't rent it for base dira for living, only for Avodah Zarah. Traces talks about so how come today we rent houses to Goyim. Let's say if Lutzlars rent houses to Goyim, the Gemara says clearly you're not allowed to rent a house because you're worried about Avodah Zarah. So in the beginning of the Masechta, Traces says the Goyim today don't have Avodah Zarah. Here, Traces doesn't say that. Here, Traces says that maybe when is it usher only they bring it in b'kvius. If they bring in and bring the sham, they bring in, permanently a fixture in the house. But if they just bring it in from time to time, let's say by somebody dies or some event, maybe a holiday, they bring in Avodah Zarah. That is not what we're talking about. Beis Dinim is on a permanent basis. And today, so it's sort of Traces here is saying that there is Avodah Zarah, but they don't really bring it into the houses like a mole, which is interesting because before Traces said they don't really. Today, they're not really idol worshippers. So it could also always be, I was thinking, when I'm looking at places that maybe, depends where you live. Because there are some places that even today, maybe they consider, or in Asia, they consider idol worshippers. So maybe, places lived in one area where they weren't, other places lived in another area where they were. I don't know. I went to rumor that exactly. But Tasha says an interesting thing, and this is fascinating. Tasha brings another opinion, that we don't really own our homes in Chutz La'aretz. It's not a permanent home. Mashiach will come, we're all going to go to Eretz Yisrael. He doesn't spell out those extra words I just said. He just says that a house in Chutz La'aretz is not really considered your house. So when is the Easter of Avodah Zarah in your house? Only in Eretz Yisrael. In Chutz La'aretz, since it's not Beisach, it's not really your house, so therefore it's not really Yosef. And then you continue going further. According to that view, There was never a chi mezuzah mahatayda in your house. I told you before. Taisha says, that a rented house is not chay mahatayda. For according to this, a house of chutzlaret is not really chay mezuzah mahatayda because it's not really your house. It says beisecha, the same word that says at the top of the page, that a renter. Because there is an opinion that a house of chutzlaret is only chay mezuzah. But there's a Chaim Sefer, if I remember correctly, put down in Pista 2, all about making a chanukas abayis in a house of chutzlaret. What is such an union? Is it really your house? All based on this case, even though Tesha doesn't like it and goes on. Anyway, let's continue. McLeod, so Moshe says McLeod. The fact he said there are places that you are chayiv, that even for places that you're allowed to rent, etc., etc. The fact he said even the places you're allowed to rent means that places you're not allowed to rent. Who says that? Only the Rabbi. Rabbi Yeshua holds you can rent anywhere. Even at Yisrael, Rabbi Yeshua holds you can rent because he's not goyzer. If you're going to rent next time, they're going to sell. But why would a person think because you can rent, you can sell? Even though before we had by animals, large animals, you're not allowed to sell them because the next time you might rent. So there is a flow on from renting to selling. But I guess in this Indian, Rabbi Yeshua felt that people won't make that mistake. So the fact that it says it means we're going to Rameir. There are places that you don't rent. The stomach that this follows Rameir that holds the Rabbi Yeshua b'chol duchter moger. Rabbi Yeshua allowed to rent everywhere. And yet, even though the Stam Mishnah follows Rameh, at the end of the Mishnah, we pass him like Rabbi Yosef, you said before. Now, it's fascinating, as again, we have sugyas, and you always think to yourself, if I need to do some more learning on this particular sugya, you would think to learn the Masechta that's dedicated for that subject, like Hilchos Shabbos. What would you look for Hilchos Shabbos? Masechta Shabbos. Muktzah, maybe you go to Masechta Bay a little bit as well. But, look Shabbos. Here, this next Amud, you learn very important in Yonim of Shabbos, which is here. Now there is a text of Yeches that talks about this whole thing here, but the famous machlekes is Rabbeinu Tam and his nephew read about if you're allowed to hire a kablan, and work for you on Shabbos. You give them by the piece. You say to them, "I want this house. How much is it going to cost? $10,000 to build this house. Mine, it's yours." And he tells you he'll finish in 6 months. It's up to them. Finish Shabbos, days, nights, Sundays, whatever they want to do. Kablan. Yeah, if you can do that, have the guy working for you on Shabbos. Are we worried that people think it's chiyuv? Are we worried that people mistake it? It's more to do with Maris Ayin, because it's not working for you, it's a kabbalah, working for himself. They can choose the hours, the days, whatever they want. But does it look like Maris Ayin or not? Subject is right here. And then tomorrow is about if you have a partner or guy, if you're allowed to open the store on Shabbos. I mean, these kind of things. It's amazing. That's the end of the first page. And the Rishayim are here. Also, if you have some days there in Shabbos, but the sugi is really here. Says the Gemara. Tan we learn the Shmuel says, the Teisha says in Christus that we learn Shas Dibrat Treda Anim Makmecha Shim Makamach. It's referring to certain sugyas in Christus, which we'll learn above over there. Same idea. Says the Gemara. Tanya Loy Yisked Odom Merchotze Lo'Eve Gechavim. You should not hire out your bathhouse to a guy. Talk about hiring out. Why? Because people call it Yankel's bathhouse, and they'll think that the people who are running it right now, the Balonim, they are working for you because it's your bathhouse, and they're working on Shabbos. It's all Maris Ayin, and that's forbidden. This guy will do malacha on Shabbos and on Yom Tov, and therefore it looks like that he's working for you. Avol the kusima gerim, and the only problem with kusima that they didn't accept all the mitzvahs, and we had more psachim that those mitzvahs that they did accept, that they do follow, they're more frum than we are, but they don't follow, especially they don't follow divrei chachamim. So when it comes to kusi, mai l'chayda shadi, but it comes to kusi l'chayda, it sounds like you're allowed to. It sounds from Shimon ben Gamliel. The only time that it's also is to rent it out to a guy, but you can rent it out to a kusi because they won't keep it open on Shabbos. So there's no issue there. But there's other issues. For example, kusi amos avid ben malacha. When the kusi, where does the kusi act differently than we do a chalamayit? Because the whole chalamayit, now there's a big machlek in the Shem had a cotton, and actually here again, whether isra malacha chalamayit is mahatoida or midrabanan, it's merely in a smachta. The Gemara they said the word deraisa, but the Shem like Ben Thomas says only the rabbanan, and that's a smachta because it's based on a pasuk we call deraisa. And I told you that when we learned my cotton thing, I told you then. I think I mentioned again the machlekes, the famous, very Yisraeli machlekes, and the Rambam, how we understand the concept of a smachta. If a smachta is stam association, how do you remember all these Yisurim Rabbanan? So we find a pasuk somewhere, and then we associate with the pasuk. even though we learned in the beginning of Avodah Zarah, the Chachamim weren't such psukim either. For some reason or other, they'll still remember the pasuk better than they'll remember the halacha. So it's a random thing. That's what the Rambam says. And the Ritva says, Chas in Rosh Hashanah, it's Chas to say that. The Ritva says that no, that Eibishter wanted, the Torah wanted that this should only be Midrabban. Because there are different sets of laws. Safi the Rabban Lakula, the Torah wanted this should be get the Rabban. So if those who hold the Chalamoy that I said, the Gemara clearly says it's Mahat Torah. Those who hold the Rabban say that the Torah, when the Gemara says the Raisa, because that's what the Torah, it came from the Torah to be Midrabbanan. So it's considered midraisa, and others say that it's sort of mahatayda, you're not allowed to work, and the rabban have the right to decide what work you're allowed to, you're allowed to, and certain things you're allowed to. Anyway, so the Gemara is saying, you know why kusi is permitted? Because what's the problem? The problem is chalamayit, right? What's he going to do? He's going to heat up the water. We're also allowed to do things on chalamayit, even though we hold that you're not allowed to do malacha and chalamayit, but bath is something that you're allowed to do. And therefore, what's the problem? There's no problems to a kusi. That's what I'm saying. So, eimas of a b'malacha b'chol shemayit, and not me abdinin. B'chol shemayit, we also do. So the Gemara, so it sounds from here that only a merchis is forbidden, but a field you're allowed to. What's the din about your field to a guy? To rent a field to a guy in those places that we're not talking about, there's a problem of chanoi. In Chutzlaritz, for example, everyone holds you're allowed to rent a field to a guy in Chutzlaritz. The question is, you're allowed to sell. The man holds you're not allowed to sell, and the BH holds you're allowed to sell. But everyone holds you're allowed to rent a field to a guy in Chutzlaritz. The question is, what about Shabbos? He's working on Shabbos. And the people are going to think everyone knows it's your field. You remember you're renting it. So everyone knows that it's your property, and they'll think that you hire them. So my time, Shadi, my time. Why taka you allowed to? Because arisuse ka'avid. Most times, because a lot of work involved in the field, most times you have an arrangement of a sharecropper. So he's not working for you. He's working for himself, for his percentage. You have a benefit from it, but he doesn't even think about you. He just thinks about himself. He wants to get his half, third, quarter, whatever his percentage is, and therefore you're allowed to. So the for the Gemara, Merchas Nami Amri want to say Adisa Adisusa Gavit. So why can't you say the same? Why do people automatically assume by a Merchas that he's working for you? Maybe he has some arrangement of profit sharing. So when I answer Hadisa the Merchas of the Inche. It's not the way. No, with field, it was a very common practice. But it was not a common practice by a merchant. So here you have this long case of Machlek Zabein Tam Lari. Zabein Tam says, Ma dochan oris, where he taka working for you also, but because he's getting benefit as well for half of it, or a third, or a quarter. You're allowed to kosh get a kabel a kablan. A kablan where he's working 100% for himself. He gets the wage 100%. They're for sure allowed to. That's the word of the time. He brings all these different rights. His nephew says Pufaket. He says Bayanor he's getting a chelik of the land, so it doesn't look like a worker. He's like an owner, a part owner, because he's getting a half, a third, a quarter of the produce that he's working on. A kablan doesn't get anything from what he's working on. He's getting money, cash, which is the same thing you do when you have a worker. A kablan looks much more like a worker than even if he's a kablan, he looks like a worker. He's getting paid for what he's doing, and therefore says that he's not allowed to because it looks like he's working for you on Shabbos. And it's very interesting. Tesis here brings down that Rabbeinu Tam, when he built his own house, he followed his nephew's advice and he didn't allow the workers to work on Shabbos. And in halacha we say it depends if it's in the Jewish area or the Goyish area where if people can see and not see, and also because Tesis there brings down today it's much more common to have a kabbalah because the Gemara makes a difference if it's common or not common. It's not an open-ended story. This is mutas dasar. This merchitz is not common to do this. Okay, it's also Mashenk and Sada. It's common to do this. So if a kabbalah, for example, is the way that most builders work, it changes. But nevertheless, in the Yiddish area, it doesn't look right. You have Avshe Mills and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, but interesting, it all revolves around here. Says the Gemara weiter. Now he says, don't rent a field to a kusi. Why not? Because it's called on your name. The kusi zeh by merchitz. Whatever he does with Chalamah, you're allowed to also. So what's the problem? But when it comes to a field, he'll work on the field when you're not allowed to work on the field if it's not a double of it. So therefore, you should not rent to a guy to a kusi because it looks like that it's your field that he's working for you. which this sounds more like the Malacha and Chalamoid Madaraisa. Because making a Gzedis already. The whole Isa of Malacha Chalamoid is the Rabbanon. What are you making Gzedis for? Anyway, I believe the Shem talk about it. So what do you tell me about a goy shari? Here, if I can't. Before we said by a merchatz or goy not allowed to, but a kusi you're allowed to. When it comes to a sada, we flip it around. A sada, a kusi you're not allowed to because he'll work a chalamoid, but a goy you can. Why can't you buy goy? See what it says here. My shari. The Amri, because people will say, people will say, what kind of arrangement do you have? It's not your, he's not working for you, he's doing for himself. So why is a kusi any different? Even if it's a kusi, why won't people automatically assume that he's doing his own thing? And if he's working a chalamoid, you shouldn't be doing that. Okay, that's his, to him and the Eivishter. He's not working for you, he's an artist. Why goyim arisim and not? Says the Gemara, Arisusul Rab Shimon ben Elazar Lesley. He doesn't believe in the concept of an artist. No, so how come a guy you're allowed to? How come a goy allows you to rent to a goy? He'll work on he'll work on Shabbos. No chayr. So he said like this. Very interesting. The psyche of a kusi versus the psyche of a goy. My time in mutter. You know why it's mutter? The amrinale. You tell him, hey, it's my field. I don't want you to work on a Shabbos. V'tzayis. He'll comply. But kusi, for the mother, no kusi nami, rent it out to a kusi and tell him I'm renting on the field on condition you don't work on Shabbos. You don't work on Chalamoid. Nami, amrin lei. But say, listen, kusi loy tzayis. Why? The Amri says, I know better than you. I remember I saw in a tshuva somewhere that it's better to rent. Better to hire a cleaning lady in your house or a babysitter, a goy, than a yid who's not shema Torah mitzvahs, because they think they know everything, and the guy knows they don't know, and they'll ask you, "Can I touch this? Can I do this? Can I do this?" Exactly what this Gemara says right here. If that's the reason, isn't the reason the guy will listen and the kusi won't listen? What do you tell me that you shouldn't give it to a kusi? So why you tell me don't give it to a kusi? Because everyone knows it's your field and think that the kusi is working for you, and you don't believe in this other's business, and he won't listen to you. Typically, then it's to learn better. Say from here, because the kusi also is not allowed to work chalamayid. Forget about working for you. He himself the chayid, and he's not allowed to work a chalamayid, and you just machshel him by giving him a field, and you're enabling him to work a chalamayid. Forget about the fact that people modest ayin, they're going to think that it's your field working for you. So the Gemara Chada, first of all, that's obvious. Now this is a fascinating machlekes. I just show you how one machlek leads to another. So if you learn that working chalamoid is mahat Torah, makes sense l'fnei iver. But if you hold that working chalamoid with the rabbanon, where does l'fnei iver come in?
That's exactly.
Yeah, novas. So Rabbein Tam says mekan, because he will hold the chalamoid in the rabbanon, right here. It takes us typically mekan that there's an isa l'fnei iver even for an isa the rabbanon. And what's the base of that machlekes? The Chakir the Zechemer I told you a while ago, where the Chakir was that by the Lifnei Iber is a separate Aveda, or it's a chelik of the Aveda that person does. If it's a separate Aveda, I'll take a stumbling block. It doesn't matter that the Isa the person is doing and the Isa the Rabbanon. The Lifnei Iber is Mahatoida. You're placing a stumbling block. You place a stone on the floor, and you make it's a stumbling block. It's only also Rabbanon, but the fact is it's a stumbling block. So therefore, Mahatoida, you're Lifnei Iber. But if you learn, and that's what Rabbeinu Tam says. But if you learn that Lifnei Iver is a chelik in that person's Aveda, and that person's Aveda Sachakol is the Rabbanon, where's the Lifnei Iver Mahatayra? There isn't. And the Rabbanon is a double gzeh, like you just said. And therefore they hold that it must be that Isa Malach is the Isa. So in fact, some of the Rishonim learned, how do I know that the Isa Malacha Chalamoid is Mahatayra is from this Gemara here, from Lifnei Iver, backwards. We go the other way around. That because of Lifnei Iver, it must be that it's Mahatayra. Because they hold the Lifnei Iver as a separate Aved altogether. Yeah, but it's amazing how you arrive at one thing from another thing altogether. And again, it's all from this Gemara right here. Tomorrow we'll continue with Shem and finish the Perek. Okay, have a good day.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.